Black people make up roughly 3% of the UK population. That's millions of people, families, workers, professionals, consumers, creators. But when you look at who actually owns businesses in this country, especially businesses with employees, that number drops in a way that should make you stop in your tracks. So according to the research from Oxford Business School, there are just over 9,300 black-led small and medium-sized businesses with at least one employee in the UK. And when you put that next to the total number of SMEs, that works out to be 0.17%, not 3%, not even 1%, 0.17%. Now, most people hear that number and they will look for a simple explanation. Oh, it's the black culture. It's the black mindset. Black people are lazy. They don't take risks. Our work ethic. That's easy. That's just like an easy cop out. But the numbers like this, they don't happen by accident, and they definitely do not persist for decades unless something deeper is going on. Well, that's what I think anyway. And this video, I kind of want to sit with that discomfort of reality and not just going straight past it, because that's all we do. Now, before I continue, most of you may have heard about Elaine the Pain when she kind of came out and said black people need to boycott all Asian stores and buy black. And if you didn't, let me refresh your memory real quick.
Should we boycott Asian shops? Is that what we should do? And then every one of them said yes. Yes. Okay. Because how are black people supposed to mobilize if they're in our communities? It's not no Asian hating. It's about economics and why black people can't keep their black money within their community. So when you go to your corner shops and, you know, the food stop that they sell, right? They sell our food. They go to the corner shops. They have chicken shops lined up in our thing. It's all going back into their community. How's it coming back into ours? We have to boycott them. We don't want to, but we have to boycott them to keep it within our community. Otherwise, how are we going to progress?
That video went viral. She got a ton of hate for it, a lot of racist comments. I'm not a proponent of that. And in many ways, I understand and agree with what she's saying, but there are some fundamental reasons why this ain't gonna work. And this video is not for me to go against her points. It's more just to highlight where black businesses are in this country. Everything I'm about to tell you is coming from official data. You can find it. I'll put it in the description. And look, people are very quick to argue with feelings instead of facts, but I'm only here to spit facts. And I'm going to start with the data, because I think if we start with the data, we can remove all the emotions. So let's slow this down a little bit and sit with what's really happening. According to Edward David and Joel Byman, who were researchers of the Oxford Business School, there are around 9,300 black-led SMEs, right, across the whole entire UK who actually have employees. So that's every sector, every city, every region. That number is pretty small, and it sounds small because it is bloody small. Yes, there are more black sole traders and micro businesses, sort of like probably what I run is a micro business. But even when you include those and the total number of black owned enterprises, still that only reaches the low tens of thousands, basically. Now, compare that with population share. Black people are roughly 3% of the population, yet black-owned employer firms make up far less than 1% of the business base. And the Federation of Small Businesses adds another layer to this. Ethnic minority-led businesses overall account for about 5 to 6% of UK SMEs, right? And within that group, so within that small group, black-owned firms are consistently the smallest of that segment. So it's crazy. We pretty much don't own anything, sort of like houses. In 2020 alone, right? Among minority-led firms with employees, Indian-led businesses made up almost 30%. Black African-led businesses made up just 4%. So within the BAME category alone, and I hate using the word BAME, we only make up 4%, all right? So right from the get-go, we don't have much institutions. And don't get me wrong, there are many small businesses that are black-owned where they have freelancers or staff that are not on payroll, and they will not be accounted for in this data. But I would assume we would still be in the minority. And this is one of the first reasons why Elaine's goal is difficult to achieve, because as a black person, to just shop black would be almost impossible and unsustainable. It just wouldn't work. According to an ONS survey, around 30% of black British adults have considered starting a business. And that is double the rate seen in many other groups. So it's not like black people don't want to run business. They don't want to be entrepreneurs. You know, they do want that. And from a personal viewpoint, a lot of young black boys that I grew up with, they hated the idea of getting a job. They viewed it as inferior. And in some cases, they laughed at people with jobs. I'm from Southeast London. A lot of the people that I grew up with, you know, we're aligned with gang culture, street culture. And I've said it before, yeah, all my friends that didn't play football went to prison. And understandably, it was because they did not want to have jobs. So in some way, they had a business mindset, but the energy was misplaced into other things. But I digress. So the idea that black people are lazy or less entrepreneurial doesn't really make sense because the data shows it's the opposite. And between 2011 and 2018, the number of black self-employed workers actually doubled, rising from about 54,000 to almost 108,000. That is one of the fastest growth rates of any demographic. A lot of us want to be successful and run businesses, but there's a small little contradiction. Despite that growth, only about 10% of black workers are self-employed compared to 13% of workers overall. And that makes black workers the least likely group to be self-employed, even though interest in entrepreneurship is among the highest. And that gap, in my mind, that gap is not random. It's not a random thing. And it tells us something is happening between intention and the actual outcome. Something is interrupting the pathway. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you can probably guess what it might be. But just wait. We are going to get there. So nearly 46% of all black entrepreneurs in the UK are based in London. And that's according to the Mayor of London data and also ONS data. But that level of concentration is like very extreme. That's pretty much half of all businesses. For comparison, only 11% of white business owners are based in London, right? And this is highlighting a problem. Black people are clustered in the major cities. We rarely stay outside of the major cities. This is due to, community, family, friends, culture. And I do get it. I understand it as someone who was born and bred in South London. However, I always find that we limit ourselves because of this. We don't learn from what other successful businesses are doing that are not based in major cities like London or Manchester. And obviously, London is the place to be, and it is the place where people thrive, but it's not the only place in the UK. One thing about London that people ignore or forget is, firstly, it is one of the most expensive places in the world. But also, it's one of the most competitive places in the world. And as we know, most businesses don't even make it to year number two. So, why not put less pressure on yourself and try and excel in another city? Even within London, representation is still low. Black-owned businesses make up around 4% of all firms, while black people make up around 12% of the entire city's population. And I always find this interesting. We are always overrepresented in the negative areas, but not the positive ones. Something to think about. Now, the Black Economics London report estimated over 10,000 black-owned employer firms in London alone, which tells us something we got to be thinking about is basically outside of London, black-owned businesses are just not represented. They're very underrepresented. They are almost invisible. They basically don't exist. And this over-concentration creates a lot of pressure. The rent is higher, the competition is tougher, and there's less access to regional funding, fewer procurement opportunities tied to local councils outside of major cities. And I like to say it like this: where you are allowed to operate shapes how far you can grow, in some cases. And one of the most overlooked facts in this entire conversation is the role of the black woman. Yes, my sisters. According to Black Economics and FSB data, around 25% of black business owners are women. And that is higher than white business owners at 21% and Asian business owners at 17%. So black women are really making waves when it comes to business and ownership. They are leading. But this ties into something deeply concerning that's been taking place over the last 10 to 15 years. And it is boys are struggling in school. I've said it time and time again, but black boys are really falling behind. And I'll continue to beat the drum because black boys are being neglected at an alarming rate, and their academic outcomes compared to black girls is like yin and yang. So that doesn't surprise me, to be honest. But growth doesn't equal fairness, right? It doesn't mean that everyone's on the same level playing field. And there was some evidence presented in 2022. There was a parliamentary debate, and basically it showed that black women faced a lot of barriers when it comes to access to finance, credibility, and even trust within institutions. And it's well known that black people tend to get approved for business financing at a lower rate. And also black businesses can sometimes be taken less seriously. I think it's something that I've even faced myself. But if you compound that with the prejudice that many women face as it is, you can start to see how race and gender is a stack against black women. So look, entry to entrepreneurship is improving, but the ability to scale is also kind of restricted. And, representation at the bottom without representation at the top is progress, but it kind of feels like it's containment at the same time. So, the median white British household wealth is around £314,000. The median black Caribbean household wealth is around £86,000. And the median black African household wealth is around £34,000. I'm going to put this in another way. For every £1 of wealth held by a white British household, black Caribbeans hold about 20p and black Africans hold about 10p. Most businesses don't start with venture capital. They start with savings, family help, maybe an informal loan between your brethrens. There's a bit of a safety net. We don't have that. We literally don't have those safety nets. And there are multiple layers here. One of them being the lack of home ownership in the black community. I think around 37% of black Caribbeans own homes. And I think it's just around 21% of black Africans. Now, I'm going to pause for a second because I know a lot of you will be saying, yes, well, I've got family back home and, we got houses back home. We don't buy houses here. I get that and I understand that, but I'm just going off of what I found. Okay. Your anecdotal data doesn't matter in this particular case. And you may have family back home. You may have houses back home. I'm talking about here. People that are here. People that are struggling here in the UK. All right. I'm not doubting what you may have. And some of you are going to say, yeah, but what about Nigerians? And, what about Trinidadians and Bajans? You can't lump us all as Caribbeans and Africans. I know that. But guess what? When they do these surveys, they don't care whether you're Nigerian, Ghanaian, Jamaican. They don't care. They don't care. So I don't care. Don't give me no comments about that. Now, listen, like I said, it's multi-layered. And one of the biggest layers is the lack of home ownership. Black people do not own homes. And although owning homes doesn't make you rich, it's one of the biggest pillars of building wealth within families. It just forms a base. Second thing is we have the highest rates of fatherless homes. And we're going to talk about that. But our wealth is often fragmented because of this, which means it doesn't stay in the family. So yeah, I'm blaming men. I am blaming men. And the third thing, because we have so many fatherless homes, we are not helping the next generation and they don't get the skills they need. Hence why black boys are one of the worst performers in school. And also black men are overrepresented in the prison population. I know this is simple shit, but that's because it is. We just have to think and put our brain cells together a little bit more to work out what's going on. So when your community has 1/10 the wealth, you don't really have an opportunity to make mistakes. One setback could ruin your business. And this isn't about personal spending. It's about generational accumulation and exclusion. Now, let's talk about how we actually spend our money, because Elaine the Pain does have some good points. And this video is not to go against her, but instead to provide the nuance that a clip on Instagram or TikTok just can't provide. Black consumer spending power in the UK is often estimated, this is an estimate, to be around 300 billion annually. And that's from loads of different sources. I'll link them in the description. That number sounds powerful. It sounds big. And it is, but only 3% of that spending is recirculated within black owned businesses. Yes, you heard me correctly. I said 3, 1, 2, 3. Tres. I'm glad to Colombia. That's why I'm speaking Spanish. Hence why Elaine's idea, although very important and powerful, wouldn't work for us in the UK because, from doing all my Googles and all my research, there was no direct data for how much the money circulates within other communities. But we know that South Asian communities own a lot more real estate and shops. So it's likely their money circulates within their community for at least 30 days before exiting. I know it ain't no 30 days for us. So in black communities, the money does exist, but it almost exits almost immediately. And this is why initiatives like, the Black Pound Day, those things are good attempts at trying to help people keep the money within circulation. But we have to do more. We have to think about other ways and do more around this. So there's another element to this that I did kind of hint at earlier, but according to Lloyds Bank, they did a report on this and they found that around 40 to 45% of black African and Caribbean business owners were in fear that banks wouldn't treat them fairly. And only 4% of white business owners reported that same fear. And there was a debate in 2022 in Parliament again, and it confirmed that black business owners were historically over 4 times more likely to be denied a loan. And despite the rise of venture capital, less than 1% of UK venture capital funding over the past decade has gone to black founders. Now, in the debate, they didn't explicitly state why, but in these parliamentary debates, there are some obvious things that people are often scared to state, but you can guess why. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even really understand how funding or getting loans worked until about 1.5 years ago. I didn't even know what a funding round was until 2 years ago. And I've been self-employed and running my own business for about 5 years. I never failed in school and I didn't know this. So imagine all the black kids who are failing in school. They literally don't have a chance when they get to adulthood. During COVID, nearly 2/3 of ethnic minority business owners felt that they missed out on adequate government support. So you got to understand, when the trust breaks down, people don't apply. If I told you in 2021, there were no black CEOs in the FTSE 100, would you believe me? Even today, black directors make up only about 2 to 3% of the FTSE 100 board positions. That is board positions. And look, don't get me wrong. There are some success stories. You got Rick Lewis, who, he's not really British, but he kind of is. You got Sharmadean Reed and you got Timothy Amu. But those are the only few people you could probably name. It's quite rare. The pipeline it gets really narrow at the top. And I think that the talent does exist, the ambition exists, the access doesn't quite exist. Not in the same way anyway. And it's funny because if black people were performing at the level of all the other ethnicities, there are reports that there could be an estimated extra £24 billion added to the UK economy alone. These systems at the moment are wasting talent, and every one of us are losing because of this. And we could pretend that it's about mindset or black people being lazy, but that attitude is actually delaying solutions rather than us coming up with like more strategies to improve ourselves. I guess we do have to ask this one large question, which is, what are the solutions? I hate to break it to you. I hate to bloody do this. I bloody hate this, but it all starts at home. It starts when we fix the family unit and educate our kids, and also provide them with a wealth of experiences that help keep them on the straight and narrow. And my brothers, it starts with strong men. It literally starts with strong black men being the backbone of the black community and the society. And yes, we are going to face systemic issues. Yes, we may get stop and searched more. Yes, there may be some racism in the office and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not denying those things. I never do. But we've got to think critically about what we can do to help raise up our communities. Because black entrepreneurs in the UK are not failing because of ambition. It's not an ambition thing. They're navigating systems that weren't really designed with them in mind. And the truth is, black people will never be successful until we fix our generational issues. And with that being said, a lot of inequality and poverty we face is directly tied to our lack of home ownership, which is a hidden truth that nobody talks about until I did in this video right here. Peace.